Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with strength and conditioning coach for England Sevens, Dan Howells. So this episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is also sponsored by Vald Performance, creators of the Nordboard. So if you haven't heard of the Nordboard already, don't worry, I'll explain. It's really simple. The Nordboard is a really fast and accurate system for monitoring hamstring strength. So as practitioners, we can do very little about athlete age and previous hamstring injury, but what we can do something about is our athlete's eccentric strength, and that's where the Nordboard fits in really nicely. It isn't going to get your athlete's hamstrings bulletproof, but what it is going to do is give you the right information so you can make the right decisions at the right time. If you do want any more information, you can go over to Vald Performance, that's VALD performance.com, or email info@valdperformance.com. Thanks for tuning in to episode 65 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. So I'm going to keep this intro nice and short, because I've got a croaky throat and I'm full of cold, so no one wants to listen to my voice at this time. So just want to say a massive thank you for the support you've been giving over 2015. So we're coming up to 250,000 downloads of the Pacey Performance Podcast. So massive thanks for your support, and again, would love some feedback on the episode with Dan as it goes out. So enjoy the podcast with Dan, and I'll speak to you shortly. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today we've got Dan Howells, who's making his second appearance after, I think it was number 31 with a couple of other guys from Wasps. So Dan's the strength and conditioning coach for England Sevens. So just before we get started, it's the 23rd of December. The probably last thing he wants to do is be talking to me. He just wants to go home and spend some time with the family. So really appreciate Dan's time, this time of the year especially. So really appreciate that. And I just want to get you to do a little bit of an introduction yourself and what you're currently doing, and if things have changed from last time. So thanks, Dan, and welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Not much has changed. I think we alluded to on the last podcast the journey I made. It was in simple terms through university and an MSc and then UKCA accreditation and then the IS, spending 5 or 6 years there before moving over to Wasps and now with England Sevens. So a pretty linear approach and nothing too out of the norm, and that's current day. So currently with England Sevens, and we're just in the middle of starting the Sevens World Series at present, leading up to the Olympics next year.
Cool. So strength and conditioning coach, that all-encompassing? So you're in charge of on-field and gym? Yeah,
I mean, the department we have is pretty small, and that's been a godsend, really. It's been fantastic because you don't lose in translation across a big population of management. So we have a head coach, an assistant coach. Then we have a team manager who's admin-based, office-based. We have one analyst. We have a head physio and assistant physio, and then we have myself. So my job title is strength conditioning coach, but it would cover the sports science components as well. So data management, GPS, innovation projects, that kind of thing, health, and we've got a nutritionist who's part-time that works in collaboration with me. So it's quite an all-encompassing role, which is great.
Mm-hmm. So you don't have anything to do with the women's, or do you kind of oversee that as well?
No, we're independent. We do crossover in terms of our practitioners. So the S&C coaches over there will spend time conversing and exchanging ideas, and there's some similar models across both programs, men and women, but it's independent, so just the men.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before we came on air that there's quite a lot of people that kind of pass through your doors and are interested in what you guys are doing. It's a bit of a kind of fluffy, gay question, but how important do you think that is, that you are kind of open and receptive to what other people have got to say?
I think that there's two sides to the coin here. With me saying that it's brilliant in terms of having a small team, because on the ground, the important messages across practitioners with athletes is consistent and not lost. But on the other side of that, you lose the ability to converse with people in the same discipline as you and get challenged and come up with creative ideas. So you take our time at Wasps with people like Tom Farrow and Connor and Nick Chadney and Taplin. There was 5 of us, and every Friday we'd sit down and we'd call it a check-in challenge. We'd reflect on the week. We'd challenge what we'd done. Was it good? And we'd think of things that we would start, stop, and continue. So things that we would want to start doing, things we'd want to stop, and things that we should continue doing, and reasons why. So I lose that. So the people coming into the program are kind of the outside eyes that I'm always happy to get reflection of. A couple of guys, I'll always say, if you're going to come spend some considerable time with us, the one thing we'd ask back is a bit of a critique, both good and bad. So I've had plenty of people from different environments and clubs come in and go, okay, well, this was really good. We like how you do this. I've got a question about this. What do you think about your management of this way that you're managing your metabolic work in the program, and so on and so forth? And it keeps me on my toes and keeps me thinking about whether I'm doing the right stuff. So yeah, it's we're all welcoming of other people in the program, and that's across the board, coaches, analysts, the physios as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So there's obviously tons of people out there who are maybe not in a similar position, but in a similar kind of structure. That they're kind of one-man bands, or they're very small team or whatever. So what are your other kind of go-to resources when it comes to your own CPD, apart from obviously having people in and having them critique what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, online, I mean, everybody loves Twitter, don't they? And it has to be the simplest, most effective way to keep up or stay bang on trend, as I would say. All the things that are coming out real time are on social media. So if you're on top of that daily, a bit of a Twitter nose, then you'll see that and it'll get pushed in front of you. So that kind of is my dipping the toe in the water, and then I'll chase the things that I see that I have more interest in. So if things start coming up around monitoring and load management, etc., then I'll start to direct my time towards that a little bit more and go through the internet sources as much as possible. And then there's plenty of conversations with various practitioners online and on Skype, as we're doing now, that are followed from that. So because I don't get a lot of time away from program, because it is only me. So if I was to step away from the program for a given day, it means the program's not catered for from a practitioner point of view. So I do kind of lose out on that side of it. And in the future, we'd hope to have somebody else on board that we could share the load a little bit and push ourselves into innovation and other CPD-based events, etc. So social media is kind of the one that keeps everybody alive with the current trends, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just we'll move on and get into the kind of meat of it, really. One thing that I fired over to you was how you manage multiple data streams, and what I meant by that is, I mean, I kind of knew before that you were kind of running the department of yourself and a couple of other guys in a relatively small team. So what kind of data are you collecting, and from what areas, and how you're using that to affect your program and maybe drive the innovation that you've talked about?
Yeah, I think I've had a nice journey on this one, both learning the hard way and now to a point where I feel that we've got a massive bang for buck in what we're doing, especially as one practitioner needing to take that information and influence practice. So if we go back to early days of coaching, when I was a little bit more naive and didn't quite know how to manage systems as well, then I was collecting a lot of data, but it wasn't informing practice, and there was a lot of gaps data. So the one thing I learned straight away was that you've got to trial your monitoring or trial the data collection first. Never roll something out without giving it quality assurance beforehand. So if we take Wasps, for example, I collect very different data with those guys because it was 44 guys instead of 24, and their adherence was a lot more varied than the guys we see in training with the England guys, because there were some guys in or given extra days off. It was very, very different across the program in Wasps. So knowing what you want to collect is the first thing, but making sure that what you are collecting is giving you the whole picture. So there's no good having 60% adherence on, say, well-being monitoring. So that was my first learning curve back in the day. And then through the England Sevens program, I rolled out systematically, bit by bit, the monitoring that we want to do. And now we're probably at the point where it's all encompassing and we've got everything in that we want. And that for me covers off, we've got monitoring wellness to start with, which is just purely subjective. That's done through an app that we have in the union. So the boys have that on their phone with 2 reminders, one at 7:30, one at 8 a.m. To give them a nudge in terms of filling out monitoring. It's just self-based questionnaires, scales of 1 to 10, etc. But involved in that is HRV as well. So we've bespokely made the app so that they can input the HRV data, both the absolute value and the clinical score. And then that gets uploaded to a cloud. And then 8:01 in the morning, I can look online at that and bring up their wellness data. Probably the most informative part of that is a blank part. So again, this was through trial and error. We decided that the blank box that said notes that the guys could write in, we felt that we would create a situation where they could not submit the wellness questionnaire unless there was information in that box. And that might just be an NA, non-applicable. And that forced guys actually to give us a descriptive reflection of how they're feeling. So, I feel like the early signs of a cough and a cold, or I've got a sniffly nose.
No, that's fine, mate. I'm with you.
Yeah. So it's, it gives us a situation that we can force a conversation in the hallway. So that's our monitoring. And that means we can have shared information across the disciplines in the morning. But in terms of our load monitoring and managing that data stream, we don't report to the head coach every day because I don't think we have the time and effort with the number of staff to do that. So we'll monitor something called training stress balance across subjective training load, RP times time, and then we'll also look at it for a high-speed running metric as well through the GPS. So those are our simple monitoring streams that we'll take out daily and we'll be on top of morning and evening each day.
Cool. Couple of questions there. Just your quality assurance that you mentioned that you went through like a phase of making sure this is what it wants to be and what it needs to be. What did that process look like? Was it just collecting data and then evaluating after a certain time, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it was just trial and error, as a simple way of describing it. I tried some things, and the women's program was fantastic because the women's program, as I evolved as a practitioner, that evolved in terms of contact time with them as well. And so I got to a point where I could see what were the highest variables that I was monitoring in terms of adherence. So I could see that the way I monitored their training load was that I was coming back, and every weekend I'd have maybe 60% adherence. So I spent a lot of time chasing numbers, and that was ineffective for me as a coach. So that was my sign. If I'm spending time chasing numbers or chasing data, then it's not an effective tool. With the program we're in at the minute, we're in together all the time. Every day, so that data is collected quite religiously, and there's consequences if they're not entered or filled in by the boys. So it's a pretty accountable environment, and therefore we get the information we need. But it's not too complex in nature in terms of deciphering what we have in front of us.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned another thing it was something that the process that you went through when you were kind of first coming in was knowing actually what you want to collect. Yeah. And I know that seems really simple, but from the last couple of months, in my experience, that isn't as simple as it seems. And I think a lot of people maybe going down the especially the GPS route, thinking it's because it's the right thing to do, and maybe other people are doing it, so we need to do it, without actually asking themselves the question, what is the question?
Yeah.
So do you just want to take us through your kind of your path along that quest to find out what is the actual question?
I think, you've got to just ask yourself what and why, and have a rationale for it. So if we take the GPS, for example, we know that we've got a tolerant group of individuals, and we know that we're not playing on the weekend. So we could probably afford more fitness over fatigue over freshness in our given week of training. Absolute performance, I say, is not paramount in a given week. It's more about how we prep for competition in the specific 2 weeks before competition. So with that in mind, we don't spend our time looking at load of a given day. We can get a rough estimation of how loaded we were, just simply by taking the RPs from the guys and looking at some absolute scores on our GPS. But what I wanted to know was making sure that guys weren't spiking in their training exposure, so that we were putting into them what was perceived as a normal session, but for those guys, because they've had some time out with a dead leg or illness or whatever, that actually could be a spike for them in training based on their last 4 weeks of load. So we spend more time just looking at one variable, which is high speed running for us, factored into a training stress balance. So the 7-day rolling average versus a 28-day rolling average. And we just specifically look at that to give us the status of an individual, the training status of that guy, and whether he's in a extreme fatigue or extreme freshness, and push and pull him as necessary as an individual then. And our coach is very receptive to that. If we need to modify a guy and pull him out of certain drills or add extras on top, then he's very receptive of that. So that's our rationale for using the GPS. In terms of our monitoring, we know that we want to have an influence as early as possible for early signs of immune function or immune suppression, and that's the common theme that seems to come out, is that we can jump on that as quickly as possible with nutritional intervention, because if you don't have those conversations, generally players tend to wash them under the radar. So those will be our two key things really, is managing the stress balance of a player on feet, because we do a lot of on-feet work, and making sure that their wellness and HRBs are matching that. And if they're matching it, all great. If we've got one out of kilt with the other, then we can intervene and work with that to try and bring it back in balance.
Cool. So just one more on that. The app, is that something that's been created in-house, or is that an external app?
No, it was something that was created in-house prior to me arriving in. And the beauty of it is that you can actually, there's some common modules. So across squads, there's common modules, i.e. monitoring and how we upload our training videos and certain documents that you put to player profiles, etc. But then for the wellness, you can actually design the questions, whether it's number based and data entry based or slider based or whatever. So we've done that with our analyst and worked to develop that. There's been a couple of versions of that, but we're at a consistent version now for the last 12 months. So yeah.
Cool. So just move on a little bit. I know just want to talk, well, first you want to talk about the data that you collect in the gym. Yeah. I know you guys are big fans of using the GymAware.
Yeah.
So just want to ask you to give your kind of opinion and experience of, firstly, using the GymAware and where that data goes and how you manipulate your training off the back of the data that it spits out.
Yeah. We started to use it originally as just a basic bit of technology that we could get the boys informing what they were doing a little bit better. So coming to work with the lads, they weren't of the awareness or education about the importance of intent of movement. So we had the GymAwares in and we educated the guys on the ability to use the GymAwares, and automatically it becomes competitive. So we put a solution in and we got the outcome without necessarily talking the lads through it monotonously. So that was the first thing we did. And then secondly to that, we've evolved over time to use it for different things. One being power monitoring. So something Dan Baker type with a 20, 40, 60, 80 and 100 loaded jump squat, and getting a force curve for those guys across the squad. And actually, because it's just myself as one practitioner, and we generally tend to train with a squad in the gym at the same time because it's big enough, and that's a great use of time for us within our big program, is that it's hard for you to go and monitor guys one by one unless you've got the technology. So we've got 4 GymAwares set up on 4 platforms, and all the guys can self-monitor themselves on that. So if we're doing a testing day, they select their name, input the load, work as maximally as possible. It gets sent up to the cloud. I can extrapolate it, and we can have a look at whether they're progressing in the right direction. So we use it within training as well, but also for assessments throughout the year. It's pretty quick and pretty effective with the cloud-based system they've got.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the power profile. So you've got different curves, different people, obviously. Yeah. Then what do you? Probably pulling teeth a little bit here, but what do you gain off that? Why bother doing that? How does it influence things?
It's very much talking to Dan Baker about these things and going, well, he sees that the power output attained at an 80 kilogram loaded jump squat, for example, can differentiate between successful rugby players and the non-successful rugby players, or the elite and non-elite. So we've very much done the same, and we've got quite a quota of academy guys in our group and developing athletes. So we use the 60 and the 80 kilogram loaded jump squat to interpret their current power output ability. And then we just track that over time. The 20 and the 40 really are just used as warm-ups in preparation for the 60 and 80. So in terms of what we take out of it, we're looking at the 60 and 80 as our main metrics at the moment, to compare guys from pre and post themselves, but also across the squad.
So do you use the gym wear all year round, or is it just certain times of the year that it gets plugged into your training?
We have it at certain times of the year from a programming point of view, and that's when. And also we have a bit of an earn the right culture. So our guys have to meet certain thresholds on, say, our isometric mid-thigh pull before they're really working on considerable power output programs. So our young athletes who come in and are obviously needing strength development first, we're just putting numbers on it to show them that they're way off where they need to be in the future, not necessarily for how old they are now, but it gives them areas to strive for. It's nice to track the development and for them to see their development. And so it comes out for certain players most of the year, and then it comes out on tour when we're in a taper phase for every player, when we're in a kind of velocity 10-day prep for competition, and then it comes out for assessments.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that the isometric mid-thigh pull. Mm-hmm. Why that assessment, and what else do you gain from that apart from whether they earn the right to do a plugged into a certain program?
Half it comes down to hands on deck. So if I want to assess people, and I've done this as well in the past, we did squat, bench, and we did mid-thigh pull. But squat and bench was taking out a considerable amount of training time for us, especially when we were 2 to 3 weeks between competitions before we were back on a plane. So I chose the mid-thigh pull because it was giving me the most consistent numbers. It was always the same position, the same. It was always comparable across athletes. The thing with the squat is that we were finding ourselves different ranges, different people. You were getting people with slight knee tweak, and so they couldn't do the full squat, and so on and so forth. So it was our most consistent based assessment. I've used it for a number of years, back it with the AIS as well, so I know the numbers and know where I want to get the guys to. And for me, as a one-man S&C department, it takes 2 or 3 minutes per person to do. So you think about a squat protocol, it's going to take you at least 10, 15 minutes per person. So it's just much more efficient for me.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So just to kind of transition a little bit into what you just mentioned there with regards to being on tour in camps.
Yeah.
Obviously, recovery between games and post-tour, post-camp is obviously going to be paramount for you guys. You just want to talk to us a little bit about the kind of techniques that you use, whether that differs at certain times of the year, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple. It's nothing that anybody else is not using. I guess it's more about how you really push it at the right times. We don't spend much time out of competition using recovery modalities. We kind of have a stress to adapt philosophy. As soon as we're in a 2-week window before competition, we'll start to factor in extra recovery, and that largely is around mobility. We've got big philosophy on joint mobility and tissue health, especially after long haul travel, especially with our tour guys. So daily on tour, we'll have pull sessions and mobility sessions, whether that's pre-rugby or post-rugby, depends on the schedule. And how many days leading into competition is dependent on how many time zones we change over as well. But very simple stuff. The coaches are very, very good at understanding that depending on how far we travel, depends on when they can go full hog with the players as well. So if we're gone 12 hours, for us, it's going to take 3 to 4 days to get over that jet lag. So we'll spend 3 to 4 days on real high mobility and recovery focus. When we get to competition, it's very much about empowering the player. Our culture is around giving guys information and entrusting them to make the right decisions. So we have the squids or the compression garments that we've used, the normal text gold, which are now called recovery pump. So we use those. The boys have compression skins, and they have clinical grade calf skins and full length as well. And then nutritional recovery education. So we have a set process based on whether we've got 90 minutes before our next meet after a game finishes, or whether we've got extended time beyond 90 minutes. So we don't tend to eat a wholesome meal if we've got 90 minutes or less before our next meet time. So the physio and I will make up some bespoke shakes, some high nutrient-based shakes rather than just a protein-based shake. So there's loads of different areas of nutrition. The guys opt in with what they feel is best for them, whether it's ice baths or hot and cold showers. It's entirely up to the athlete, but there's a couple of things that will force on them, and that's mostly nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the use of ice baths. Obviously, a little bit of controversy around that at the minute. What's your opinion? Are they the guys that feel that is the right thing for them? Are they kind of encouraged to do that all the time, or is that intervention kind of modified for certain games at certain time frames?
We will. I guess we don't push any ice baths when we're training in pre-season and prior to comps. We'll look to stress to adapt, so to speak. As soon as we're in competition, we encourage ice baths for a multitude of factors. Because it's contact sport, we say, look, you get yourself in the ice bath if you feel it's necessary. If you've got some bumps and bruises and it will help, then that's great. But most of the guys, it's probably a 50-50 split. There's 50% of the guys that love an ice bath, and there's 50% of the guys that hate an ice bath. Now, if we went with an all or nothing rule and put all in the ice bath, we're keeping 50% happy, and we're probably losing 50% emotionally as well. So we don't want to detract from what makes people feel good. So it's very much up to them and empower them. I've got no problems either way, because if they feel it works, then it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
They need to believe in it.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, I won't keep you for too much longer, but I just want to touch on one more thing, which was something that you mentioned at the start. Well, I mentioned at the start with regards to your kind of gym and field-based stuff. Yeah. We've had James Wild, and obviously, Jonas has been on to discuss all things speed. I just wanted to get your kind of how you're incorporating speed into your program. I know it's kind of just how it kind of relates to in your environment, really. It's all right kind of discussing how things might work with track and field athletes, but I think obviously dealing with your guys is going to be so much different. So I just want to get your take on how you do it, when you do it, and what you're actually doing. Okay.
Well, obviously speed's pretty fundamental in rugby, sevens specifically. It's twofold for us. We do it with the guys or every guy from an injury perspective, injury prevention perspective. I'm a big believer, and it's part of my philosophy, that you need to run fast and sprint fast to endure doing it in a game. I think it's criminal if you've got sprints, high speed based athletes that you're not doing speed work with. It's once you get them to a certain threshold, it's not risky. So we do it from a protection point of view to start with, but also from a development point of view with a certain percentage of the lads. So, for example, we have big 110k guys who are aerial specialists, dynamic carriers through contact. Speed for them isn't as crucial. For the other guys, it is, and for those guys, they'll sprint twice a week. They'll do Mondays and Thursdays, so immediately post a day's recovery or 2 days recovery. We'll tend to work on acceleration bias in one session and top speed running max velocity bias in another session. And also within the week, the coach factors into our sessions 20 minutes of agility twice a week, which is also encompassing what we call ball transfer. So the movement of the ball in attack whilst you're cutting, for example, is something we'll train together in terms of an agility point of view. So we do get quite a lot of high-speed running technical work and ball-in-hand work in a chaotic environment from an agility perspective as well, that the coach empowers me with prior to or at the beginning of sessions. So we've got quite a high dose of it compared to probably a normal rugby club. I think it's quite paramount to our development. And Jonas has actually come in for the pre-season, came in for a session a week with the whole squad for good effect. I think it's really important to get those kind of specialists in, because it really does captivate the players. They love specialists coming in for those reasons, and ultimately they've got more to offer than I would do in that area. So yeah, and we're fortunate to have the time to do it, which is great.
So are you timing you guys every session or periodically?
No, periodically. It's
Okay.
more of a monitor. I think the one thing you tend to see in rugby players is that the moment you ramp up the volume of training, so you cover a lot more of that middle ground speed and the middle ground energetics, and once the times then are close to the beginning of season speed times that you've taken, but they might not be better than. I think we spend 4 or 5 weeks off at the end of the season, and actually guys come in really rapid because they've had that time off, they've freshened up, they've almost metabolically deconditioned from an aerobic anaerobic point of view, and therefore they're as you expect, fast as. But we'll keep a check on their monitoring basically, and we just want them to be within certain thresholds of their PBs for us to be happy. And we've had situations where guys have fallen outside of that. The coach is happy for us to pull back on some of the rugby to spend a bit more time on that speed if it's part of that individual's game. So, yeah.
So you mentioned agility stuff that you kind of share with the coach or mingling with the coach. What's that look like? I mean, I know you described it a little bit, but coming from your perspective, what are you looking for in them sessions?
We're looking for very much. There's twofold to this, because you've got my philosophy to start with is about developing underpinning agility movement patterns. So I have about 5 or 6 key movement patterns that I use with guys, and they're our drills. You guys get into the right positions in the right way at various different speeds, and it's all in your control. It's all anticipated by the person doing the drill, and they can practice it, and it's repetition based. And then the second string to that is how can we put those movement patterns that we feel are strong and there's a high incidence of them in rugby sevens into practice. So take cutting, for example. How do we put that into an environment where what's in front of you is changing all the time? So we'll create a constraints-led approach to agility. It's very hard when you put down to a one-on-one drill, the guy who's defending doesn't want to get beaten, and the guy who's attacking wants to beat him. So you clash in the middle. So we constrain the defender in certain ways. So we ask him, the only way he can defend is with rushing. He has to go full pelt at him, or the only way he can defend is backpedaling, or with his shoulders turned, or with a dummy in there or whatever. And we force the guys who are in attack and the guys that are focusing on their agility to make decisions based on the environment in front of them. What we're looking for is for the individual to have a toolkit of solutions to movement, and that they choose the right strategy at the right time with what they see in front of them. The coach is very good at integrating that at the early part of rugby in 2 sessions a week for us.
Cool. So in that area, who are you've mentioned Jonas, who are your kind of go-to guys when it comes to that side of things, the agility side of things?
Yeah, I like having conversations as opposed to going away and reading so much.
Yeah.
The two guys for me are definitely Chris McLeod, who I spent a bit of time with and talked about different areas of agility within speed monitoring and so on and so forth.
So is it English and EAS?
Yeah, Chris is EIS. He's a technical manager, but he's done a lot of work with netball previously, and his area of interest would be change direction, agility and movement. And then the other one is Ben Rosenblatt, who has the hockey program over at Bishop, and he's doing a lot around that as well, and also did part of that recent workshop with Jonas to good effect. So those 2 guys really, and even Jonas, I mean, we talked about how do we, I was working with him in the sense of I need you to work on the technical models of these guys, but also how do we get these guys into those technical models from very random and very varied changes of direction. And the traditional way to work on speed is obviously out the blocks, low start, project yourself and raise up. But in rugby, you're very much in a stood up position. Then you need to compress, and then you need to accelerate, and it's it's generally off another change of direction from another direction. So we talked about what are the common things we could look for, and Franz Bosch talks about attractors. What are the key attractors you'd look for in terms of getting in the right positions to express that perfect model of acceleration? So yeah, Jonas is another one, because Jonas would give me the insight from the other side of it, in terms of what's critical in those first 2 or 3 steps. So therefore, what do we have to maintain in our change of direction to create a good outcome at the end of it? So yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to let you go in a sec, but I just want to obviously to give your details out. Where can people keep up to date with what you've got going on?
Yes, simply Twitter, I guess, which is at Howells Dan, HOWELLSDAN. And yeah, that's it basically in terms of keeping up to date with me. I'm not too mainstream with my own website or anything like that. I kind of keep myself under the radar.
Yeah.
But that would be the best place to have a look at what I'm up to.
So you're obviously pretty open to people coming down, having a look at what you're doing?
Yeah, I think obviously it's what we ask is that there's something in return.
Absolutely,
we always
100%.
we want something back, whether that's some shared information. There's been I've had Jack Naylor over recently, who's expressed some of the work that he did with Chelsea and PSG and over at Rail, and really interesting to hear his thoughts about things from the football side of things, and some great food for thought there. So it's guys coming down is great. It's just getting contact, and then we'd have a discussion and see what we could agree from a mutual beneficial standpoint.
Cool. Well, like I say, I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to thank you for your time on a couple of days before Christmas, and let you get back to more important things. But yeah, I appreciate all your insights, and obviously been open with what you're doing. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you soon, mate.
And you, Rob. Cheers, mate.
Perfect. Cheers, mate. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to episode 65 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the chat with Dan. Massive thanks for your support over 2015, and huge thanks again to Vald Performance, creators of the Nordboard, who continue to sponsor the podcast into 2016. So they launch mid-January, so if you are interested in getting more information about a Nordboard, drop them a line over at valdperformance.com. So thanks again, and I will see you in episode 66.